Welcome, everyone, to a special episode of the Comicsology Club, a podcast where I, Snoop Lynch, as well as my better half, Higgins Sturm, and our favorite sponsor, Michael Lopez with 008 Studios, get together, drink together, but more importantly, we read comics together. We had the amazing opportunity to sit down with the writer Andi Ewington and pick his brain about some of the innovative storytelling he's done across various comic book series. Andy's impressive writing credits include books such as 45, Sunflower, 6, Dark Souls 2, Just Cause 3, and the list continues to go on. In this episode, we'll focus on his transformative work for Freeway Fighter, which serves as a prequel to one of the stories in Ian Livingstone's fighting fantasy series, originally created in the 1980s. Andi Ewington brings a fun and fresh perspective to this post-apocalyptic world, where he weaves a tale of survival, redemption, and resilience of the human spirit against a backdrop of societal collapse and lawlessness. Join us as we explore Andy's creative process, the inspiration behind breathing new life into an old universe, and the thematic richness he brings to contemporary audiences. So please buckle up and get ready as we embark on a high-octane journey through Andi Ewington's captivating vision that is Freeway Fighter.
Oh no, Andy, thank you for joining us, man. I really appreciate it. I know that we talked earlier, and we just wanted to kind of sit down with you and talk a little bit about your journey as a writer, and then your entry into the comic realm, and then the comic of choice today, which was the Freeway Fighter, if I'm not mistaken. So just learning a little bit more about that, and just opening the mic to you so you can talk a little bit about your medium and your art, so to speak. So.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate being on the show with you guys. So great that we've managed to connect and get going on this. So ask away. The floor is open.
Yeah, so let's talk about the kind of like a condensed origin story. I always like talking about, where people came from and kind of their journey into the industry. A lot of writers, a lot of developers kind of struggle going from that indie to that AAA and vice versa. The industry is just a complex machine. So tell us a little bit about where you started and how you got into the comic realm.
Sure. Let's start in 1991. I was a graphic designer. I was working in the computer game sector. So I was working on lots and lots of different computer games, from things like Championship Manager 2 to Quake, Unreal. I did the original packaging on Unreal, worked on Unreal Tournament. I was doing a lot of packaging. Hexen, worked on Total Annihilation, some real old school games. And I did that for around about 30 odd years. Absolutely loved the computer game industry. And I think around about year 2000, I was like desperate to write. Something in me was like, look, I can play all these computer games. I can design beautiful packaging, but I kind of, I could spend a lot of time playing a computer game. I could almost write a book in that time. And I thought, you know what, that's what I'm going to do. Tried to write a book, wrote a huge, ridiculous sized novel, 200,000 word plus, tried to get it published, got a lot of good rejections. And then I kind of sort of like fell away. It didn't happen. And I was like, okay, well, I gave it a shot. Didn't work out. Fast forward to around about 2005 and 6, and I was working for a design company that just happened to have a sort of a sidearm in indie comics within the British market, comics. And, working with them in the day job, and sort of things were happening in my life. I was getting to a point where my wife's about to have her first child, and I started to pitch ideas of, look, maybe I can go back and look at some of these ideas of writing and actually turn it into a comic. I was starting to learn about the comic industry from comics, and I thought, well, actually, I'm going to start punting ideas. Obviously, I punted the book that went in 2000. That wasn't going to go. So I needed to write something a little bit more sort of original and a little bit closer to the truth. One of the things you learn is always try to write from the heart and write from something that you've got good experience of. And the father to be was happening to me at that time. And so I punted this idea of a journalist in a superhero world that could have a test, not to determine whether the child was going to be a boy or a girl, but if the child was going to be a superhero or not. And that got picked up, and we went ahead, and I worked with a whole host of comic artists, people like Charlie Adlard, Liam Sharp, Sean Phillips, just loads of different artists that got on board to do like one page with this sort of transcript, question and answer sort of format. It's a little bit different, a little bit like World War Z in the format.
Oh, okay.
And that did really well. You know, it got some really good reviews. It sort of was my first foot in the door for the comic industry. That got released in about 2009, 2010. And then I had a little sort of I had the doper, the hit, so to speak, of like, I really enjoyed this. This was a really good experience.
Oh.
You know, writing was writing a comic script is totally different to writing a novel. And at that point I was like, great, I'm gonna try to make a career out of a secondary career. It's really hard to make a career in comics unless you're very, very lucky. You tend to sort of foil it around a day job or something. And lo and behold, I worked for like 10 years in the comic industry. Then the graphic design job imploded, and I found myself looking for work, picked up work within the computer game industry writing narrative. So I was writing games. So I was working with Supermassive, but one of their stipulations was, look, we don't want you to write comics. So I had to give up comics for 5 years while I wrote computer games. And then, you know, at the moment, there's a big problem within the industry, within the computer game industry, lots of redundancies being made. I, unfortunately, was one of those. I threw myself upon my sword, took redundancy, and I allowed me to step back into the comic world. And literally within a couple of days, I managed to pick up a 6-issue sort of series, working with 2000 AD. So on something that, you know, hasn't been announced yet. So touch wood, that's going to get all approved, and I can sort of move forward, and that will be my step back into the comic industry, which is great for me, because I absolutely love the medium, and it's you know, the time that I had within it was very, very enjoyable. Sorry, that was supposed to be condensed, but it actually got a little bit longer. I'm really sorry.
No, that's all great stuff. Yeah,
it's perfectly fine, and it's good to see that you know, as a writer, you explore different mediums, and we're able to, you know, kind of capitalize on each and every single one and experience something great within each and every single one. So, you know, it's good to hear condensed, or, you know, like just extended, whatever the case may be. It's always exciting to hear that type of stuff, that origin story, as I like to coin it. So
yeah, and it's fascinating that your kind of first breakthrough into the comic industry was such an interesting project that the one you were talking about, I think it was 45 is what that one was called.
Yep.
Just doing a little research on that, but for it to be a different artist every page, and that's your first comic as a writer, like that's wild. I never heard of anyone doing that at all. And for that to be your first thing, like, what is it like to juggle working with that many people on just one story?
I mean, it was good. I mean, it was great for me because I got to go to a lot of conventions and meet people, and then you know, a lot of the time I was literally walking around like the Bristol Comic Con or whatever, and just sort of looking at art. I could appreciate good art. I can identify, you know, that's really cool. I think that would be really good. Talk to the people. It was nerve-wracking. I think being a little bit sort of naive to the industry, in a way, it put me in good stead, because I didn't really have any sort of, you know, qualms about asking Charlie Adlard, who was working on The Walking Dead, you know, to come and do a page for me. And so, you know, it was, you know, I didn't know him from Adam at the time. And obviously now I'm like, okay, right, Charlie, you know, I know who he is. But at the time I was none the wiser. So in terms of actually approaching people, it was quite easy for me. I talk to people quite easily. I you know, a lot of the time spent within the computer game industry is basically talking to, you know, higher ranked CEOs and marketing sort of decision makers to try and get them to spend money with you. So for me, sort of talking to those people just felt natural. I think corralling artwork and getting things in, that was a longer process, but we didn't really have a deadline. So it wasn't like we were trying to hit something like a publishing schedule. We just needed to get it done. So, working with people and trying to find room in their schedule and realizing that artists were, sometimes booked 6 months in advance, and you couldn't get the artwork. And sometimes people had to drop out and sometimes you had to find somebody else, I think that was probably the hardest thing. Beyond that, being a graphic designer, putting the artwork together and putting the pages together and formatting the document was really sort of bread and butter. It's easy for me. I'm working on a comic at the moment, so I've built a team where I know the letterer, I know the artist, I've got the colorist, I've co-written it with somebody else, and we are I'm literally handling everything, the production schedule. I know when my timings are going to be done. We're going to try and do it for Gamescom, so it's tied in with a game. So for me, it's I've had many years' experience of project managing and handling teams, so it doesn't necessarily cause me palpitations when it's like 40 people and you're trying to get them all to deliver a piece of artwork. I worked on Pac-Man's 35th anniversary poster, and that was the same sort of setup where you had 35 artists and they had a deadline and they had to supply you artwork. So you just sort of build lists and just go, right, you just remind people, they go, no, you've only got 3 weeks to deliver this now. Yeah. And then if somebody gets a little bit wobbly, you either start to turn the screw a little bit, or you say, look, well, maybe I need to find a replacement. You start to get people lined up that could fill the void if that person couldn't deliver. So it's logistics, really. At the end of the day, it's quite straightforward. If you don't get overwhelmed by it, I think the problem that I can have is that I can sometimes take too many of these projects on. So I've got this one, and then I've got this one, and then I've got that one, and then you're going, okay, now I'm starting to panic, But no, it's fine. I'm pretty good at juggling different projects.
Yeah, and I've noticed just kind of going into your background and seeing what you do and kind of how you seem to put these stories together. Your talents playing the writing, but also you seem very just like comfortable and good at project managing. How did that, talking about the book we're talking about today, Freeway Fighter, how did that play into who you chose for this book? Like getting the artist together. Obviously, Ian Livingstone, he's a huge driving force behind that because he created the original game book. But yeah, like how did that whole collaboration start to getting the team together you got?
So we'll start at the beginning there. Ian's a good friend of mine. So I've always been on the cusp of, I've always wanted, as a child, I loved fighting fantasy books. Ian's books were the stuff I grew up on. So, and in fact, if you look in Blood of the Zombies, I helped Ian on that book a little bit. I got him the artist on it. And there's a little thank you in the front of the Blood of the Zombies to me.
Cool.
I'm sort of mentioned in the little credits. So I was like, yes, I'm finally in a fighting fantasy book. So really what happened was I said to Ian, look, having had the experience of writing comics, I felt comfortable trying to find a home for one of his titles. I've got a Death Trap Dungeon script, which I wrote, and I have a Freeway Fighter script, which I wrote, and I had the choice of deciding which one. And I basically was trying to find a home for it and I was announcing that I'm doing this, but as you do, you use Twitter. I refuse to call it X, but use Twitter to try to corral some interest, to try and get somebody, the right person, to see it. And it sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes you've got to be really, really lucky. And it just so happened I was really lucky. A guy called Matt Mastrati reached out from Calgary, Canada, and said, I'm a big fan of these books. I'm an investor. I will give you the money to get this made. And I was like, 80 pages is quite a lot. I mean, you're talking like $50,000, $40,000. And he went, Yep, I'll give you the money. And I'm sitting there
wow.
on Twitter. I'm on Twitter going, this is a scam. This is 100% scam. He's going to want me to give me my bank details, and he's going to empty the funds and everything.
Just like
And
a
true to
Nigerian
his-
prince or something.
Yeah, exactly. I was expecting all of that. And you do your checks, you do your due diligence, and funny enough, Matt is a really good friend of mine now, and I think he's relocating to the UK, which would be awesome because I need to buy him some beers, quite a lot of beers. But he was true to his word. He wanted to invest in it, so that made the project even more viable because now I had funding. All I needed to do was build a team. Now, I had worked with Simon Colby quite a few times, artist. I've worked with him on Just Cause 3 on a one-shot. I worked with him on Dark Souls 2 on another one-shot. So Simon was somebody that I was like, okay, I need some sort of level of real sort of weight to the inks. We're doing heavy. I want to do heavy cars, smashing into each other. I know Simon's going to do an awesome job. So I reached out to Simon. Simon was straight away sort of like, working with Ian Livingstone? Yeah. On one of his IPs? Yeah, I'm there. So he was sold. Then I had Len O'Grady. Len generally is the go-to guy if you want Simon's colours ink. Simon's pages coloured. And so Len was a no-brainer. Len was like immediately, yep, I'll be straight on board. And Jim Campbell is one of the letterers that I've always used where possible. So Jim was somebody that I could just reach out, and I knew exactly what I was getting. I was getting a really good level of professionalism. Somebody that was going to be mindful of placements and stuff. So I had my team. I had my team built up, and we pitched it to Titan. And I became the editor on the project. I was literally the person sort of pulling this together. I had Jonathan Green helping out as well. So Jonathan Green, if you didn't know, was has written several of the fighting fantasy books, and is also a good friend. And he was like, look, I'll get on board, help you edit it, make sure that, it looks good in terms of being on brand to fighting fantasy. So yeah, we had our team. We pitched it to Titan. They said yes. I was doing all the layouts and again, project managing, corralling all the files. I would always letter pass first before giving it to Jim, because then I could catch anything that had been missed or didn't quite work. I could go back to the artist, get it sorted, and then I'd give everything over to Jim. Jim would give me files back. We made it print ready, and we gave it off to Titan, and that's how it happened. In terms of how well it did, I think nostalgia played a part. I wish it did a little bit better, but I think had we had more money and a little bit more uptake, I think we could have perhaps done a few more of the stories. I mean, as it is, it's 80 pages. It was always going to be something that we would test the water with, and hopefully, if there was enough interest, we'd get a little bit more done on it. But these comic industry is very fickle. Trying to sell volume of comics is really, really hard. So, has it done well? I don't know. Did Matt make his money back? No way. But I wouldn't change it for the world. And like I say, I've got a Death Trap Dungeon script that needs a bit of work. I haven't touched it in like 10 years, but it needs a little bit of love. But I would go back and get it made if I could.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about with Snoop earlier before we were started recording. You can see the trappings of like a solo tabletop RPG throughout the comic. It's like a certain part. You go in the gas station. You hear a sound. It's a guy coming in. Do you shoot immediately, or do you like stop yourself? And you can be. It looks like you kind of just like went through that story and made a decision, and then drew and wrote what would happen if that took place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a talk. There was a comic series done by 2000 AD, I think, called Dice Man, which was a very much a choose your own adventure comic execution, where you could choose where to go. They only done about 3 or 4 issues of it before I think they were just like, look, it's just too much to generate. But it was still enjoyable. You know, you got to jump around and you read panels in different sort of chronological, out of order, to choose your own path through the comic. But we did, in the end, go for what was an origin story. You know, I wanted, my vision was to go, right, the moment that you finish that last page, you can literally go into the game book and start playing the game book.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, the idea being that I understand that the original was done back in 1984, I think it was, or 85, and you know, the artwork is slightly different, and some of the nuances are probably sort of outdated, but you know, the idea being that we wanted to give a modern spin. The car is different. You know, if you look at the car that was in the game book, that was totally impractical for a wasteland.
Based off of his car that he used to have, like I think I read the interview in the back. It was like a Corvette Stingray, like a '67 Corvette Stingray.
Yeah. So you kind of, like you said, you wanted to approach it in more of a modern context, and also like a practical sense of like, if you were going to make it out there, and also if this car was going to be as valuable to other people as it is when they see it, it needs to be something a bit sturdier.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at, we saw Furiosa over the weekend.
Okay.
I still didn't see that.
Yeah, it's really good. I enjoyed it. I still prefer Mad Max. I still think Mad Max Fury Road is almost perfect for that sort of genre. But it was still a really good film to enjoy. Probably a little bit too much blue screen for me, but it was good seeing the vehicles, and there's a lot of chase sequences. But those cars feel like they could take a hit, you know. And I always felt that the cars in, you know, Freeway Fighter, the game book, especially the player character's car, was always a little bit flimsy. It was like, that's gonna get shredded if it gets hit by anything. It really is. So yeah, we decided to sort of really sort of bulk it up and make it sort of a little bit more NASCAR-y, a little bit more weight to it.
It kind of leans into one of the questions I had written down already. Writing out scenes where it is mostly action, like the car fights or the guns and stuff like that. Is that like a challenge? Because I feel like writing words for a writer seems like it would be like an easy task, but when you're forced to write something that's not dialogue, I feel like that would be tough.
I'm going to tack on to that question, Andy, before you answer, because that was actually one of mine as well. As writers, you know, we each have kind of like our favorites. Some people are very dialogue heavy. Some people are very character heavy. Some people just really write good fight scenes. That's what they live for. So on top of that question, what was your favorite part to write?
Okay, so let me answer them in one at a time. Let's start with the writing style and writing action. I am a visual writer. That's what I consider myself. I've grown up on sort of movies, understanding camera angles. So when I write my prose and I write a comic script, I will write quite meticulous detail, of which I always caveat, and I always say to the artist in a caveat at the beginning of every single script I've done, and even of the scripts that I've just written, look, this works. This will work. Okay, these angles will work, because in my head I've already planned out the page. I've already decided where everything is going to go. And yes, this feels like quite a lot of control that I'm sort of taking over, but this works. And if this works, I'm happy for you to go, you know what, I want to do something different. You know, I'll always say that to the artist and say, look, if you feel that you could do this scene better, go for it. I'm absolutely happy. This is the general gist of what I'm trying to do. And I'll write, you know, bird's eye view, looking down, you see two cars, you know, smoke kicked up from behind. I will write stuff like that because I've already picture planned it out the page. And I will write that description down. In terms of actually trying to come up with that, because I've absorbed a lot of visual material, I find writing action scenes really, really simple. You know, it's just it's almost like a dance between pace, action, storytelling. You're just trying to get those elements in while, you know, not sort of padding it out with nothing, you know, that has no meaning. You know, a lot of the action scenes that I write have meaning. You know, there's an action scene, or there's a scene where you know, there's two cars and one sort of turns on it and they play chicken with each other, and you know, we then cut to the drivers because I want the drivers to go, you know, oh, they're not going to
Yeah, they're not going to move.
Yeah, exactly. And you just then pull back out, and then you see the aftermath of it. You know, I enjoy writing stuff like that. That said, it has been said by my editor on my book that I've just written, the fantasy novel, that I'm very good at dialogue. So again, I'm quite happy to sort of like, you know, if it has no dialogue, I feel strong that I can write a good scene that has meaning and, you know, leaves people sort of wanting more to turn over the page. And if there's exposition and there's dialogue going on, you know, I feel that it's something that I'm comfortable in doing. You know, it feels natural to me. I probably talk too much in this conversation, but that probably tells you, you know.
That's perfect. Favorite, like, I guess, scene is what you're saying, where you're like flipping to the driver, and that is like the first 2 pages. You see her driving in the I-400, and you see the scene where she's about to run into rivers, and then it flips to a scene that's the exact same in the apocalypse.
Yeah, exactly. I think that you've actually picked up on perhaps one of the really nice transitions I did, so that you literally, that is perhaps one of my favorite scenes. And I had that in mind the moment that I started this. I was like, okay, I want to write a little bit of a backstory. I want to show Rosa's life as a racing car driver. There's tension that she's trying to win this race for the first time in her rookie years. And, you know, Rivers is obviously her nemesis on the track and is causing her obviously mischief all the way through. And then there's that moment where he just goes sideways in front of her and you smash into her. Oh, sorry, she smashes into him and obviously kills him. Spoiler alert. But, you know, the actual explosion then straight into post-apocalyptic. And that's like, okay, it's just carrying on. Exactly the thing that Rosa learned on the track is now sort of in her day-to-day survival. So that's a really nice thing. The other scene that I really liked was actually the one where she talks to death a lot. There's a lot of reference to death in the book and the Grim Reaper, and she actually meets the Grim Reaper, her version of the Grim Reaper, in the sort of the shack or the house where the couple have killed themselves. And there's this big, huge, Simon's drawn this amazing skeletal sort of Reaper just sort of over the top of the bed, and I really loved that picture. I actually bought that image, that page, because I absolutely loved it. So I'm going to get that framed one day. But somewhere, I've got this book. I've got so many posters and stuff around the house, all sometimes in portfolios and stuff. And I know that comic portfolio has been moved somewhere, so it's somewhere hidden. And one day I will discover it when I'm probably really old, going, "Oh my God, here's all my stuff." But yeah. I've got it. That's probably a lesson for probably hoarding too much bits and bobs around the house, and board games. Way too many board games.
I kind of speaking into the beginning as a bit more as well, and something I really enjoyed that you did with the dialogue and the writing. I love kind of seeing into Bella's mindset. Is it Bella or Bella? I can't remember, but of how she interacts with people versus how she interacts with that car. I think that's one of the first things I picked up on, is just like, it's a much softer, kind of friendlier tone when speaking to the car that doesn't actually speak back. She speaks for it. But then when she meets meets the character that she takes along with her, there's like a hesitancy there. Was that intentional? And also, like, is it one of those things, like, when you're writing kind of those responses, are you getting into the head of that character, like, how does this character think, and also how would this car talk back to her? I guess, like, that just seems like a tough thing to do. to go back and forth like that.
I mean, absolutely. I think a large part of it is, again, you draw upon what you know. I'm an only child, so a large part of my life has been spent inner monologuing. I
Yeah.
spend a lot of time talking to myself, and that probably will put shivers down people's spines, but not in a bad way. It's just a case of that sometimes you'll sit and have an inner dialogue. You'll sit and talk to yourself. You'll mutter to yourself. And I've done it. I've drew upon the experience of going for a long car ride on my own, and you have conversations with yourself. You'll sit there and talk. And I just sort of channeled that energy when I was like, okay, well, this, Bella has been probably driving the wasteland for a while, probably not meeting too many people. And anybody that she does meet, she probably bashes to bits with a crowbar because they're trying to steal or kill her.
Yeah.
So, it's a case of she probably needs somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
And
like
the
a
only
companion.
thing that the only thing that she can trust and the only thing that looks after her is the car. So she's sort of built this personality with the car, and that, even to the point which I put in was where I think she turns around to the car and says, look after him or take care of her.
Yes. He's like, I will. And
Yeah,
then says, like, I'm talking to you.
No, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the car.
Yeah.
And he's like,
Take care of him, yeah.
yeah. So it's I draw upon myself sometimes in those situations, and I find it easy to have conversations with myself. Something like the hero interviews, which I just wrote. Again, 195,000 word novel, which is 45. So it's the spiritual successor to 45. So I did
Okay.
45 interviews on purpose to be a bit of an Easter egg to the original graphic novel. But it was pure fantasy. It's huge. It's like the Lord of the Rings. And it's just D&D Mickey take. It's just me having a laugh, and it's just interviews. It's a bit like, again, what happened in 45 is a journalist asking questions to the subject matter. And you have a similar thing where I've just written dialogue, and I just find that I can get into people's heads and create characters and go, well, how would this character sort of answer back a question like this? And I just have this back and forth banter with myself, trying to have, funny moments that are a bit revealing for a D&D world. The peasant lady or the farmer who has just seen the adventuring party just destroy a dragon and leave it rotting on her crop, and she's like, they just buggered off. They killed the dragon. They went into my house. They ransacked through it, took all my clothes and anything they could find in the cupboards, because that's what you do in a D&D world. If you was playing Skyrim, I can guarantee you that you go or Fallout. You literally go into every house and search everywhere and take anything of value. And
That's
so
why it
I
takes so long. Yeah. It's every room.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I just wrote dialogue that was very sort of on the nose with that, saying, they stole my prized dress, even stole my food that I was going to give my kids. And it just builds up. You could just do layers of comedy based upon that. That was a good, I find dialogue quite easy to write.
A player finds a legendary item. They stole my granddad's sword.
And I'll just say, you sold me just then. I was looking down at my phone, but that was just me ordering that book right now. So.
Nice.
That's awesome. Well, I it was inspired by a lot of stuff that I've done. I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and I've read a lot of Terry Pratchett, and there's 1,700 plus footnotes that I've written. That basically is like the editor, or not the editor, but it's the internal monologue of the character doing the interviewing. So he'll throw out a bit like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You get the book suddenly talking about, Zargons or whatever. It's exactly the same sort of concept.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, I've got a similar to Dungeons and Dragons, a Pathfinder group, and I'm very new to it, but it's been really cool to learn like how all that stuff works and how like coming up with a story out of a story that's already been written, basically, I guess. It's like they've given me the framework, but I'm gonna make it mine. And that's
Yeah,
it sounds like that's what you're saying.
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's, you write especially with the hero interviews, there is a story, there is an arc, but there's a lot there for people to sort of pick through, and discover for themselves. And actually, they can make their own judgments. And I don't necessarily give you all the answers. I just give you all the pieces, and you can construct your own answer from it. It's a bit like not a who done it, but there are mysteries in there, and there are things to uncover. And arguably you could sort of say, oh, X is X and Y is that, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's right or wrong. It's just that I'm quite happy for people to come to their own conclusions. And the story is open-ended enough that it doesn't necessarily mean that you're wrong or right. It's whatever you want to judge. And that's a bit like D&D. Yeah.
It's all about interpretation, and kind of where you take it, what you do with it. That actually kind of makes me think of a question. With you coming into this and writing Freeway Fighter, Ian Livingstone created this. He wrote the first, the game book. How much was he involved with the writing of this story? I know it's a prequel. I know it's kind of meant not to step on the toes of that game book and lead into it. So kind of, were there ideas that you had that he maybe didn't give you pushback on, but like worked with you? I don't know. Just kind of go into that if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, Ian was really good. He trusted us because writing comics was something that I was known for,
Mhm.
and he just wanted the source material, one, to be out there, and two, to be respected. And I'm always going to respect the source material. So really, Ian's only involvement was the look of the car. Ian was very particular about how he wanted the car to look, which is absolutely perfect. I'm really happy with the look of the car. So, there were just sort of some comments in shaping and, make it chunkier and heavier. But in terms of the story, he was really up for how I had sort of structured this, and how I wanted to tell it. And really what I wanted to do was do a lot of Easter eggs towards some of the pages in the book. So you'll meet Pete from the garage, who is in the game book. You'll have an encounter with a snake, which is something that happens in the game book. So there's things that kind of were little nods to the game book without necessarily making it too on the nose. So Ian was really cool. There wasn't a lot of amends. From memory, it was quite a breeze. The script was supplied to him. He made any comments that he wanted to do, and there wasn't a lot, to be honest, because he could. I don't want to say that he saw the strength of the writing and thought it was really good, but that's kind of what I'm saying. Without getting too big ahead.
You can pat yourself on the back every now and again.
I know the source material really well. I grew up with this game book, so I was confident I was going to write something that Ian would approve, and he did. So and we got it in print. So I'm mission complete, so to speak.
Well, I was just gonna say, I kind of speaking into that from our end, like I had never heard of this. I didn't know.
Yeah,
Like
this is new to me.
When Michael told us about the book, and I saw Ian Livingstone's Freeway Fighter, I was like, why is that name on there? Because I knew you had written it. So that's great for me, because when I started looking into it, seeing what it had been based on, like it's a good kind of bringing that back into popular culture, because and with everyone's always looking for more Mad Max stuff. Like I think for the most part people are happy with Mad Max, but there's also not a lot of it going on. We get a movie like every 10 years. So it's honestly perfect timing to get into a book like this with Furiosa coming out. And yeah, just a really cool world to kind of get into. And I think that you did a really good job on playing into that post-apocalyptic, everyone's got cars, always scavenging for gasoline. Like, this could be a Mad Max story to me. It just fits in so well with a world like that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I am a big fan. Did you see now, I'm not going to go into your politics at all, right? I don't mind who you vote for.
Are you talking about the
right.
candy bar?
Yeah.
I can already see where
Candy
you.
bar.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't remember.
That was
Trumpish delight, like a Turkish
Trumpish
delight.
delight.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's so
That
funny.
was I was really lucky, because I think Freeway Fighter was 2017, so he wasn't even president.
He would have just
wow.
been elected. I think he would have been in for like a year, if that.
Yeah, that's right. So you got to bear in mind, I was writing that just
Before,
before.
Yeah, before that.
Yeah. So I think it was probably, I probably drew inspiration from the fact that he was running at the time. And I just thought, yeah, the world's gone to pot, and Trump was in power at the time.
Wonder who or what could have led into that. Yeah, I see.
Yeah. So it was just, I just thought I just put it in as a bit of an Easter egg, and not many people ever mention it. So I'm just like, I got away with it. I haven't had a knock from the men on the door going, somebody wants to have a word with you, Mr. Ewington. Dark glasses and a little, little earpiecing or something.
Yeah.
But hey, you put little jokes in here and there.
I specifically saw like the design of it, where his hair's on the T.
Yeah.
And I was like, someone had fun with that too.
Yeah.
Very cheeky,
That was nicely done by Simon. I didn't ask for that, actually. I just Trumpish delight. So I think he put his little spin on it. So that was nice. I thought that was a good little touch.
He did a really good job. Like you're saying, the art and the colors together. Like, we've read kind of various comics over the years doing this, and I think, not knowing a lot about kind of what goes into art and everything, but one thing Higgins and I always talk about is, when you have a world like this where everything is more or less the same color, because it's like the same, desert environment, whatever, it can be hard sometimes to focus on what you need to focus on. I don't have a single issue with this in this book. It's just like, when the car's there, it stands out so well. Even like, the clothing and everything. And then again, like the environment, like it's all brown, it's all desert, but it's distinct. I never have an issue of kind of figuring out during the action what's going on. So yeah, just a really good pairing of all three of you kind of playing into that.
I think one of the things that I tend to look for is, I am aware of time of day. I do photography, so amateur photography. I'm conscious that taking shots at noon is probably the worst thing you could ever do for photography, and it's always early in the morning. So there are a couple of shots where I mix it up. There's a little sequence at night, so I kind of wanted to feel like the desert at night. Wild dogs walking across the terrain and things like that, and also dusk and sunsets and stuff are great in these sort of situations in post-apocalyptic. So giving Len the chance to illustrate at those times of days is brilliant, because it brings a different color hue to those pages. So it does break up that sort of monotonous bright orange yellows that you get with a little bit of muted tones, and especially when you start to do a little bit more sort of like when they get to the shack, the house that's run down, it's night time and stuff like that. So you get to play with the colors a little bit more. I appreciate that Len done an amazing job with the colors. He always does. I'm just starting to see the pages on this new comic that I'm putting together at the moment. I had the first page in, and it's like, yep, you nailed it. So it's got a nice grungy 1960s feel to it. So I'm looking forward to the other 19 pages or so that are going to come from him on that.
Awesome. I think I have like kind of one more question that you might or might not be able to answer, kind of about, you brought up a few times. You're working on this unnamed comic right now. Is there like hopes of that coming out within like the next year, or are you gearing up to kind of get ready to announce?
I can be totally transparent. So the Bornless is a game that's coming to Steam. So as part of the release of the game, when it starts to come through, I've I've been tasked with putting the comic together. So it's like a little insight into the world. Hopefully, if it does well, might be able to do a few more with it. But I've, the first few pages coming through are great. The art team's on board, artist and colorist. Can't say a little bit too much about that, but yeah, it's based in the Ballless universe. So if you ever check out the Ballless on Steam, it's one of the big sort of horror indie first-person extractor games that are coming out. And I think from what I've seen, obviously I get to see the game every day and see how amazing it's looking and continues to be. The studio is great, really good ethos. So I'm really excited. I'm really pumped for this title. I think it's going to do really well. So we're looking to, galvanize on the love that the Ballless has out there from the fandom, and hopefully, I can get a couple of comics made for them. And it helps with the lore. It helps sort of flesh out the world a bit and breathes a little bit of life into it, and draws people, 1, to comics, and 2, to the game. So, that's the task, and hopefully the comic will do justice, and everybody will love it. But if I get a chance and I've got something to share, I'll give you guys a shout and send it your way to have a look at.
Excellent. Yeah, we'd love to take a look at that. Awesome. Well, do you guys have any follow-up questions for Andy here?
I have a few notes that I've been holding on to, and I'm going to go backwards because he just said something very important. So Andy, I'm not sure how deep I got into the studio and what the purpose is, but bridging the gap between readers and gamers is one of those notes that we try to hit. So transmedia, where we write books, comics, and games for one IP, and just make it to where in order to get the full hit, the full itch, you have to read the book, read the comic, play the game, right? And one of the things that I've been hearing over and over again is, a lot of developers today make the game, send the game, publish the game, and then just let it do its thing. And then they do marketing after, or they do marketing in between. But one of the things that's not really looked at is what other mediums can you leverage while you're making the game to help build the hype. And comics is one of the things that always comes up. So you talked, Dark Souls. You talked,
Just Cause 3.
Yeah, Just Cause 3. Thank you. And a lot of people don't think about that, and then after the game comes out, they make the discovery. But it's a really good marketing technique for all the writers and developers listen to this. The second thing is you also touched on 2 very important aspects, and that is networking and going to conventions and building a team and being able to do all that, and then just practice making perfect. You practice different mediums, and then you build a portfolio. So it's not just, hey, can I make a comic for you? And people are like, who are you? No, you have to have kind of like a repertoire for what you're trying to do. Now, all that being said, all those writing notes and development notes, because that's kind of like my realm. I did want to ask you one question, because there is a second part to this podcast that I think none of us have touched yet, is the drink. So I wanted to ask you, what is your drink of choice for this comic, and how does it relate to the comic?
Well, I was going to find some bourbon, but I don't have any bourbon in the house. So I do have some Jack Daniels. I'm going a little bit light with the Coke, but it's a nice little canned whiskey, Tennessee whiskey there. And the reason being is there's a scene in the comic where she pulls out this sort of bourbon and sort of chinks the car as a sort of a toast and hits the dash with it and then takes a swig. Not that I'm an advocate for drink driving, but I think you can get away with it in the sort of
post-apocalypse.
Yeah, with big spikes on, I don't think you're going to worry about what you hit. Or getting sort of pulled over for being under the influence. So that's my choice. It's a Tennessee whiskey with a Coke mixer. Bella would be drinking neat bourbon.
I think I've stayed true to that. I don't know if you can see it with the background.
Yeah, that's what I like to see.
I wanted to note that because I've been flashing it a few times, but I didn't want people to think that I was an alcoholic. That is the purpose of the podcast.
Troops might show you what we have, but funny enough, I had bullet bourbon at the house, so I made us a couple of Manhattans
Oh,
the
nice.
for the podcast today.
Yeah. And I guess
Very
it's
cool.
good that we haven't really kind of dived in deep with the bullet, because the last time the podcast had bullet bourbon, we had to do a re-recording. So,
Yeah, we've limited
little-
ourselves to one this time.
A little sneak peek into the new one is it almost needed to be at least the back half needed to be re-recorded to get on the last one we did.
Yeah.
So
We're keeping
bullet
ourselves
bourbon
sharp
kind of
today,
bites
but-
us.
Higgins, you got any other questions?
Can't really think of anything. If you have just a bit more time, Andy, we do another short segment. I don't know if you'd be interested. It would last for 10 minutes, maybe at tops.
I am yours to do as you see fit.
All right, so I'm gonna do something that might be a little bit annoying, but dun-dun-dun-dun-dun,
It will be a little-
dun-dun-dun-dun,
yeah.
dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, readings for squares. And this is a segment where we jump past the reading of the comic book and we just kind of dive into what we've been
What other
taking in
things have you been doing?
in other
You're
media.
big into video games. I know the last time Michael told me you guys had a call, you had to hop off to play some Diablo 4. So what
Yeah, I've kind of gone off of Diablo 4 at the moment, even though the
Okay.
new season has come out, and I should be playing it. My boy is downstairs right now playing Fallout 4.
really?
He's found a mod that's called the One Ring, which is
Oh, I
based
like
upon Frodo's One Ring. It doesn't make him invisible, which is immediately the first thing I said. I said, "Are you invisible? Are you slowly getting corrupted? Do you have to go to Mount Doom?" It's like, no. I just can carry as much as I want to, like 2,000. The weight is like ridiculous, like 2,400. So consequently, he's got literally a town on his shoulders that he's walking around with, just the pots and pans and everything. And you can't see it, obviously. I would just love visually a game to represent exactly what you are carrying. So you end up a bit like, do you remember I think it was it the Dark Crystal? No, not Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, where you had that old witch that was carrying literally all the house and she started to put all of the stuff on the girl. I want a character that represents exactly how much I am carrying. So if I am carrying like 30 guns, I want to see 30 guns. I'm going to write that into a book. That's it. I'm going to write that into a book. There's going to be a scene that you've given me an idea now for the hero interviews.
Not only
I'm
not only that, you also have to take into account that whenever you're in combat, whenever you're selecting from your inventory, everything pauses around you.
Yeah,
So
that is that as well. It's like I want that as well. I want that moment where you're sort of sitting there and you say to the bad guys, "Just wait there,
Yeah,
wait there,
I had to go flip through
wait,
this.
wait."
I gotta get something out of my garage. Hold on.
Yeah, exactly. I want to do that. What else am I playing? I am also playing a lot of Hearthstone. It's my go-to.
Okay.
There's a bit of weakness.
uh,
Go on.
Like the Magic the Gathering, like mobile game.
Yeah,
All right. I know
yeah. I
my
love a bit of that.
my roommate has been big into it in the past. So
I like the new mode, Battlegrounds. It's basically an auto battler. So you choose which character you are, and then you buy minions, and you just throw your minions out. So there's no spells or anything. Well, there are spells, but that's part of the buying process. You can buy spells and then add it. But ideally, what you're doing is an auto battler. So you end up with like 8 or 9 sort of minions in a row, and they randomly attack the opponent's minions, and you've got to hope that all the buffs and the death rattles sort of keep your minions alive and kill theirs. So it's a good mode. It's not so much like a your turn, my turn type of thing. It's sort of like a simultaneous battler, and you just got to keep alive. So your health is getting whittled down every turn, and you randomly fight somebody else in the pool, and you got to try and be the one last man or last woman or last person standing. So
yeah.
it's good.
Snoop,
What are you guys
some-
playing?
Yeah, I'm actually I bought it a long time ago, but I never actually dove in. But I've been playing Hades on my Switch
I've seen
because the new one just came out in like the beta form, I guess. But I started diving into that, and I'm not a big I'm not really a big roguelike guy, but this one really kind of breaks the mold from what I've seen from a lot of the other ones. It stacks onto itself more than the other ones that I've seen.
Sounds
Every
like it's
run,
a bit more forgiving, maybe, when you die. Because the roguelike, remind me, roguelites are where if you die, you normally have to go back to the very beginning and kind of start from scratch, right?
yeah, so I'm starting over every time, but each time I come, the characters at the place that I'm starting over again, there's new dialogue. I gather these things, I don't know, they're purple crystals, but I can spin those to get buffs that help me be better on my like concurrent runs. And it's like,
So you push you further down the line. So it's like, okay, I don't have the little dagger now. I've got the bigger sword. I can go three
Yeah.
levels more before I die. Okay, but I've got some more. It just gets you into a loop of spending more to become
more
a
and
little
more
bit better.
stuff.
Yeah, I loved Hades. I thought the dialogue was awesome on it, the original. So
It's just
yeah,
wild to
comedy's
me
good.
that they say something new every time I die. Every time I see a character, it's a different paragraph.
Yeah.
And I just want to give kudos to them because right now the studio is working on a rogue-ish element game. That is a lot of writing. So it is
Yeah.
a lot of writing. So kudos to them.
I have a question for Andy, a gamer dad question. So your son was playing, or your son right was playing Fallout. What do
Yeah.
you guys play anything together? Like, are you doing anything right now? Like, any kind of co-op thing?
Yeah, we'll play. We used to play a lot of World of Tanks together. So
Okay.
World of Tanks, we used to play that a lot together. We used to play Fortnite together as well. But then I got crap, so he refuses to play with me.
You didn't make the cut.
I didn't make the cut, so he got rid of me. And his mates are much better. It's that typical sort of thing. I used to be really good at games. I could just spin, shoot, go, oh, yeah, gotcha. Now it's like I'm like, what is that? Is that something? I'm dead. I'm just like, he's going like, Dad, stop doing that. You're getting yourself killed. He's got to come over and res me or grab me and then run to the nearest reboot van. Yeah, we'll play games. Probably not so much now. I tend to do more sort of sitting there watching him play something. A lot of the time, I'm actually quite busy having to write, so I'll just get the laptop and then literally sit next to him on the sofa while he's playing something. But you think I can talk? He can talk. I mean, literally, he will just commentate on everything that's going on. And so we're at that stage actually at his life where he's doing his final sort of GCSEs, which are sort of before you start going to college and stuff. So I'm a little bit more sort of. Fortunately, it's summer not summer holidays, half-term break. But it's like just saying to him, look, okay, you can spend a day playing games. That's absolutely fine. Chillax. Tomorrow, you're going to be doing your maths. And it's just like, okay, I want to see 8 hours worth of maths, not 8 hours worth of Fallout 4, because Fallout 4 isn't going to, find you a job. Well, it might do. I mean, I think I was told by my parents probably that, computer games perhaps aren't the be all and end all of everything, and I should get on with my studies. And to their credit, they were probably right, because I would, if I perhaps paid a little bit more attention in class and English and maths and whatever, I probably would be a little bit stronger than I am already. But that said, I think it gave me a good understanding of the of the computer game industry. I understand what makes a good game. The fact is, I went into computer gaming, so to me, it was like I was doing the homework.
It's funny you say that because I can just imagine it's like Fallout's not going to get you a job, and then he'll turn back to you and be like, "But it got you a job. That game got you a job." So,
and there is also the other one, which is come the nuclear fallout that one day may happen. He will go, but Dad, I'm a wasteland survivor now. you know, and I know how to survive. And
Exactly what to do.
yeah, exactly. And I'm like, eradicate, you know, got radiation coming through me and everything. And it's like, don't worry, Dad, I'll sort it out. Don't drink that water. You know, all of that. So yeah, who knows? Maybe this is good. Maybe that's good that he's playing so much Fallout, because he may save my life at the end of the day.
Oh boy. So I'm not gonna throw anyone under the bus, Snoop Higgins, but I do see that we forgot a very important segment. We forgot to give Andy the ability to pat himself on the back officially on the podcast. Nobody has given a rating.
With a rating for the book that we do. Yeah, we normally do rate. We could do that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, we can do that. We like to do. We call it a rating, but it's kind of like,
Whose line is it anyway?
yeah, if you've seen that, the numbers don't matter, and it's just kind of a fun little thing that we do. That
Give me an
being said,
example, Higgins.
Michael, since you threw us under the bus, would you like to give the first rating so I have
Gladly.
time to think about mine?
Yeah, it's not going to be a bus. It's going to be 4 cars. So 4 cars.
Yeah, 4 cars. Okay.
Yeah. By the way, another note just to give you a little bit more time to think about yours. I actually am a Corvette owner. So I have a 1981 Corvette sitting in the garage collecting dust, mind you. But when you guys said, "Oh yeah, well this car is more robust," part of me wanted to say, "Well, wait a minute, Corvettes are great." I remember taking, just a slight incline towards the driveway and just a Corvette going. I'm like, "Nah, you guys are right. You guys are right." So yeah, my car would not last very long.
Yeah.
All right,
Well,
I think I'm gonna give it the I-400 Championship Cup
oh,
because I really enjoyed it, and you introduced me to a whole line of books that I might have to start diving into. The fighting fantasy, like I've read all the
Do it.
I've read a good bit of what Terry Pratchett and Douglas Adams and stuff like that, and if it's anything like that, I think I'd really enjoy myself.
yeah. I think Andy would enjoy you giving him money, so I think we're all on board for that. I also really enjoy the story, and yeah, just like it's a short volume, like, but you've done a lot with it. Again, the pacing and everything was just really stellar. The transitions and everything from, like Higgins talked about, going from before to the wasteland, the character building, the character relationships. Love a good car, and that is probably one of the best cars I've seen in comics. So for all those reasons, I'm gonna rate this book 5 out of 5 snake bites. That's my rating.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we appreciate you doing this with us. Appreciate your time. And we look forward to checking out some more of your work. You got that one comic on the way. We'll keep an eye out for that as well. And also the game that's going to be with it on Steam. And I also think we didn't really mention this, but I think it's cool that there is a writer who's writing in comics that also kind of brings things back to video games. Like I had seen your name before, and I was talking to Higgins' roommate. It's like, yeah, we're going to interview this guy's name's Andy, and I was like, but I've seen his name around somewhere, and he had your Dark Souls comic. That's where I'd seen it before. Yes, so it's just again not really something that I see when looking for books to talk on this podcast. So really really cool stuff as someone who also really likes video games. So yes, thank you for all of that.
I really appreciate it, and like I say, it's been a pleasure to come on, meet new people. Obviously, Michael I've met before, but Tyler, Jared, it's awesome to meet you. And look, whatever happens, give us a shout. I'd love to come back on and say to you, "Hey, got some new stuff. Check this out."
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
All right. Yeah, absolutely.